We
are
answering
your
Flash
questions
today
on
Keep Shooting
Monday.
Hey everyone, welcome to Keep Shooting Monday, number 76. My name is Greg Casillo from Casillo.com.
And I'm Kathy Azar from Catherine Azar Photography.
You have just about a week and a half to get your photos posted to the Keep Shooting photo assignment, sponsored by Epson. Anything flash, any subject matter, anything, as long as you use the flash in that photo, it is accepted, so make it some good ones. Please use off-camera flash if you can, or bounce it, or do something with it. It can be studio, outdoor, whatever you want to do. Make it a good flash photo and get them posted. You could win a 16 by 20 print of that, or maybe even if you're runner-up, an 11 by 14 printed by me on the Epson 3880. And again, another thanks to Epson for sponsoring that. So Kathy and I have been talking about other ways to work, things to work into the show, so we thought we would start talking about stuff that's going on and stuff that we do on a weekly basis. So, Kathy, why don't you start with what's been going on this week?
You know, it's funny. I talk all the time about how much I love people in photos, and this week I've done a lot of non-people photos. Working with a realtor locally who contacted me after he listed my parents' house. He had put some of his own photos up for the pictures of their house, and I saw them and went, oh, no, that's not what my parents' house looked like. And I went down and used my lighting and all my flash, which was the first time I had used it for real estate pictures, and sent them to him and said, here, use these. And then the very next day he called me and said, do you want to work for me? Yeah. So I've been doing a bunch of real estate pictures for him, did some this week. And then I did landscape pictures, which again is not something that I normally do for our landscaper in the business group that we are both in a branch of. And so that's what I've been doing. But I also did Home of the Sparrow, who I've talked about before, is a charity they do a lot of work for. Last weekend I did their Home of the Sparrow Jazz event, and I did a lot of the editing for all of those pictures this week and got them uploaded to their site.
What was that little thing you brought us today?
Oh, and this, my daughter wanted me to print a bunch of pictures for her on the Epson printer that I have that I love, and so she brought this out, which I had forgotten that I had. We talked about cute last week with this. How cute is this? It is a thumb drive. And it actually is a Nikon thumb drive.
And we'll put a link up to one of those.
From Photo Jojo. Yeah. I love Photo Jojo. They have some of the coolest things for camera lovers. And that's a little thumb drive, flash drive.
Neat. Very neat. So this week for me, was there anything else?
Sorry. Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
For me this week, number one, I had to deal with returning an SSD drive that failed. And I was actually surprised working with Samsung how easy their RMA process was. They didn't really give me a hard time with it. They sent me out the mailing. They paid for return shipping.
Wow.
All that stuff. They actually returned my emails.
That's impressive.
You would send it. It's rare that you have a company that during the RMA process is going to return an email. They returned my emails, and the only thing I can't remember, I talked to them on the phone when I did it. I think it was actually someone here in America that I was speaking to, which in this day and age is also difficult to come across sometimes. So that was also a nice thing. But yeah, it was an easy experience. I sent it back. The hardest part was finding a box to pack it because you try and recycle stuff and get rid of it right away, you know.
And that's a good lesson for all of us too in our businesses. Photographers are a dime a dozen these days. Everyone with a fancy camera is advertising that they're a photographer.
Yeah.
So customer service is something that sets us apart as well.
So yeah, that was good. So cheers to that. Thank you, Samsung, for that. I got it back in, put it back in the computer, and it's running fine. So I was surprised that it had an issue in the first place, but hey, it happens. They make
product.
Millions and millions of them. They have a 3-year warranty. That's what that warranty is for. So it worked out.
You shot something cool this week too. I'm jealous.
Yep, it was interesting. A friend of mine owns a hot air balloon company, and she has a package which includes photography. And so I went out and I shot a couple on Sunday morning. We had originally had it scheduled for Friday, but we The weather wasn't good, so we ended up not flying, so we did it on Sunday morning. Got some really neat photos of when they were setting up and inside of the balloon. I can't show any of the photos as of right now, but it was a fun time, and hopefully you get to do more of those.
So have you gone up in a
Oh
balloon?
yeah, I've been up 5 or 6 times,
Okay.
7 times. Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
I don't see you as a off the earth kind of guy.
That was fun. That was
Okay.
fun. Yeah, it's. I'm definitely not the
Skydiving
kind of thing. That's a little much for me. But as far as the balloon thing, it's not like the big, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not like a big rush kind of a thing. It's
Right.
more of a
It's not
relaxed,
adrenaline
chill,
rush.
let's go for a ride kind of thing.
Have a glass of wine.
Yeah, it's almost like a car ride. You know what I mean? Just hop in the car and let's go. You know what I mean? It's kind of
In the air.
exactly. You're up in the air rather than on the ground. So that was what happened. The 2 things that happened for me this week. We have a lot of questions.
We do,
from last week.
and hopefully some of these will help you as you try to address the contest and use some of this information to go forward.
I think we have like 13 or 14 questions here
great.
that we're going to go through and answer. So from this point forward,
Questions.
unless there's something else you wanted to talk
We're
about
good.
news-wise, let's get right into all of those gazillion questions. Question from Julianne Moore. I'm currently using a Nikon D90. I find that I cannot use my Nikon 80-200 2.8 lens with a flash because the camera sync speed is 1/200th of a second, which leaves me with camera shake and motion blur. I have to use my lighter telephoto lens, lower grade, or a tripod when syncing with the flash. Is it just a limitation I had to accept with my D90? This sounds to me like there's a combination of a couple of things that might be going on. Number one, I think you need to work on your technique when using that lens. Make sure that you're holding the camera properly with your palm straight up, your thumb to the left, have the lens sitting right on top, pulling your body, pulling your arms in nice and close. I think that's going to make a difference. And the next thing I'm concerned about, and Kathy and I were talking about it, is the focus. I think you might be careful that it's not a focus issue, because that particular lens is a little bit on the slow side. It's an older lens, especially when you put it on a D90.
It doesn't have VR either, does it?
No, that is not a VR lens. Depending upon which one of those, because there's also 2 different versions of the 80-200. So depending upon which one it is, it could be like a 15-year-old, could be even older than that, depending upon which version that she has. Anyway, be careful of that focus. Is it really a blur, or is it an out of focus thing? The easiest way to tell that is, do you have somewhere in the shot that is in focus? If you do have somewhere that's in focus, then it's most likely a focus issue, and it's not a movement or blur issue or a subject issue.
But it makes it sound like when she uses her lighter telephoto that she's okay. So it may be that it's too heavy for her.
It could be. So maybe try a monopod. This is one of those, just like everything in photography. Everything depends. Everything's a compromise. Everything depends. And Kathy has always hated it since the day she met me, because the answer is always, it depends.
I want an answer.
In photography, there just are very, very few absolutes. In my mind, there are a lot of absolutes.
Shocking.
Because of the way that I do things and the way I work a lot. But try those couple of things. I find it hard to believe that it could be just a flash only issue that's depending upon the lens. The fact that you're zooming in a little bit more, that could make a difference.
Okay.
But I think that answers as well as I can. If I didn't answer your question, please feel free to ask again.
Next question is from Dwayne. Great episode and interesting topic. Looking forward to the next discussion on flash and posing. You got it. I am not sure if you got lucky or if you purposely avoided getting any flash or light reflections in Kathy's glasses. Could you elaborate on how to avoid getting reflections on glasses? Thanks. Greg doesn't just get lucky. He uses good technique.
And you know what? Let me clarify that a little bit.
Okay.
A lot of that getting lucky is because I've made those mistakes.
Right, it's experience.
A lot of times I've made those mistakes.
No, you didn't. You only made them once, and then you learned.
Yeah, and work with other photographers and other people and doing it time after time after time. So it's not just a matter of getting lucky. Sometimes it's just
experience-based, right?
You recognize those situations without even thinking about it. You just do it.
Yeah. So that was the reason we talked about, we had the flash up, I think it was on the side, a little bit higher to avoid reflection. If that doesn't work, you can play around with your strobe, where your strobe is positioned. And sometimes it's really tricky depending upon the glasses. And Greg said, as we were talking about this prior to the show, that my glasses don't seem to be very reflective, so that helps. Another thing that I often do with clients is just tilt them a little bit downwards. Sometimes the angle of the glasses can change how your reflection looks. Sometimes it's really tricky to avoid. Do you have any other
certain
extra
glasses,
tips?
yeah. Well, this is a physics thing, and I hope I say this right, but the angle of incidence equals the angle of reflection. I hope I said that right.
Well, I have no idea.
Basically, what that means is the angle that the flash is hitting the glasses is the same angle that it's going to come off of the glasses at. But the more circular the glasses are, the better chance you have of getting an issue. Just like if you use a wider lens, you're going to have more barrel distortion, like a super wide lens, or more and more to the fisheye kind of a thing. It's that same idea with your glasses, because it's all optics. So if you change the angle so that the glasses are pointed down, like Kathy was saying, and you're basically just moving that back bar up slightly, and you're barely even going to notice, if at all. You're just not going to notice. The person might feel a little bit weird and uncomfortable, but just assure them and say, hey, you're not even going to be able to tell. Don't worry about it. Sometimes you need to edit it out. Most of the time,
that can be tricky.
It can. Most of the time, just play with your light angle, move it up a little bit, move it down, move it to the left or the right, and you'll probably be fine.
Francis D asks, hi Greg, love the cute softbox, haha. I just wanted to know if there's enough clearance in the fixture to allow for the speed light to sit on top of a flash trigger. Thanks. Well, check out this rig.
This thing is a little on the unwieldy side, so I probably wouldn't be using it on handheld at all. I might use it just to do something fun or different in the studio. If I really needed that special light right next to the camera, it might work. Probably be a little bit better if the softbox is a little smaller, because they actually make one of these in a 20-inch rather than a 24. So I have it on the bracket, and this is the way that Adorama said to actually do it, which is on a bracket. As far as the trigger like you're talking about, it depends. It depends on how tall this thing is. If you take this little guy off, which is the cold shoe part of it, you can then take the quarter 20 off of the Pocket Wizard or some of the other strobes, put it right in here, and use this knob. It'll gain you like another ½ inch or whatever it is of the height of that thing, and so you might be able to make it work. These bars do have a limited amount of height, and so you can raise it and lower it to a point, but basically it depends.
And for those of you who are looking at this saying, Greg, you have your camera bracket set up backwards, that's the way he likes it.
It is the way I like it, because I do have big hands. What I will do is I put it on that side so that I can still use the vertical grip, and then flip it, although I don't use the bracket hardly at all anymore. I have 2 or 3 of them, but I very rarely use them. In fact, I said to Kathy, what the heck did I do with it? I'm looking for it, and I couldn't find it.
But you really have to have big paws in order to make that work, because I can stretch it and make it happen, but it would be really uncomfortable. You said you have 11 inches from
11 inches from there to there, yeah. And I actually measured that in college at Antonelli when we were shooting with 4x5s. Because when you have a 4x5, the farther you move the lens from the film plane, the more you're cutting down on the amount of light. And so instead of taking a ruler all the time, I measured that to give me an idea.
My mother's is 9, and she does the same thing when she's measuring fabric or something.
Yep, it works out well.
All right, Alan has a question. Hi, Greg and Kathy. I rent a shoot-through umbrella for wedding shots to do fill-in flash photos. I have done 2 weddings so far and have another one penciled in for January, summer, I think that's fascinating, means he's not in our hemisphere. Would a light box like the one you used on this video be better? Thank you. And I can already tell you, Alan, what Greg is going to say. It depends.
It always does.
But if you're comparing similar sized softbox to similar sized umbrella, the umbrella is going to give you a softer light pattern, and Greg can expand upon that.
Yep, it's definitely going to be softer with an umbrella, especially the edge. It's not a matter of the light coming out of it directly, because you're not going to see much of a difference in between the two. It's the edge of it, the edge of the light coming out of the umbrella is going to be softer versus the harder edge and the more directional edge of the softbox. So it really depends on what you want to shoot, how you want to shoot it.
Either one can work, but
either one can work, and it depends on what you're doing, what you want, the other light that's there, how many people are in the shot. A lot of different variables. All I can say is play with them both, try them both out, see what you like, and then kind of go from there.
See what suits your style.
Yep, exactly.
Jason Nolan, how does high-speed sync work with off-camera flash? I thought that only worked with the strobe on camera. And we have a second. What about sync speed? It shows your background test shot at 1/640th. Do you keep the same speed with flash? 1/250th is the Nikon sync unless you're using FP. So we have two sync speed questions.
Just to clarify real quick with Sly, 1/250th is not on every single Nikon camera.
Correct.
It does vary per camera. Your particular one might be a 250th, but not all cameras are 1/250th. In fact, they had the Nikon D70S had a super high sync speed. I think at 500th of a second,
Whoa.
which is a rare in a camera. So I wish I could find. In fact, I know someone that has one, but he's going to sell it, and he's selling it to somebody else. So, but D70 is getting a little bit old. Anyway, to answer the question, number one, I did not change any of my settings in between the ambient only shot and the flash shot, and that's intentional because I want to set up the shot, I want to get it set, see the ambient only, then add my flash, see what it's going to look like, and then it's going to be easier for me to tell what I need to adjust with the strobe versus the ambient. Do I need a little bit less ambient light? Do I need a little bit more? Do I want to raise or lower my shutter speed? So a lot of that comes back to knowing the 5 things that affect the flash exposure: your ISO, your aperture, your flash power, your flash distance, and the modifiers. And I'm going to put the fancy little graphic up. So yes, it makes a difference. You got to know those things. And of course, your base camera exposure with your ISO, your shutter, and your aperture. You got to know all those, plus those additional 5 that make the flash up in order to make it work. How does it work? So go back to that first question, which how does the high-speed sync work, or sync in general? The normal way with flash works is your shutter opens, then the flash turns on, then the flash turns off, then your shutter closes. That's the normal way. It's going to allow you to have full power of the strobe, and you're going to get basically as much as you can out of that strobe if you did need it on the highest power.
Let me interrupt
setting.
you real quickly. Greg, as you know, knows way more about this stuff than I am. I'm still learning as well. I know how to make my equipment work for what I need it to work for, but things outside of that I'm still learning as well. So when you're saying 1/250th is the sync speed, it means that's the fastest sync speed, the fastest shutter at which you're getting full power from your strobe. So that's when he says about using FP, that means you're going to get a higher shutter speed, but you're still getting flash, but the output is going to be less.
Correct.
So it's not as strong. So just in case.
And the way that works is instead of the shutter opening first and then the flash turning on, the flash is turning on first, and then the shutter is opening, then the shutter closes, then the flash turns off. And since it's on for a longer duration, you have a less output, and so that's how it's going to work.
And we can combat that.
Yes, our little toy that I made. I had all the parts around, so I just made one, although I will put up a link to one of these where you can do 2, 3, 4 strobes. There's a bunch of different ones.
That are pre-made.
Yeah, that are pre-made instead of having to make your own.
For those of us that aren't MacGyver.
Sometimes I like the DIY because I can control how things are made. In this instance, I had all this stuff except for, I think, screws and the little rubber washer. I think I had everything, so I ended up just putting it together and making it myself.
So the reason you'd use this is you can put 2 strobes on here, fire them both, and then you're going to get more flash output even though you're using a higher shutter speed.
Using small strobes.
Correct.
You wouldn't want to use something or couldn't use something like that if you're using a large studio strobe.
Correct.
You wouldn't need it because you have the additional power.
Right.
But if you're limited, you're in on location, maybe you only have those additional or those small like Nikon strobes or something like that. And something like that, if you needed additional light, like if you're trying to darken the background on a bright sunny day and you're in full sun and you want to overpower the sun with your strobes in that shot, you need to increase your shutter speed, and that means you're going to have less output out of those strobes because of your high-speed sync. And so the best way to go is to add additional strobes. So
that's a good example. Geo asks, hello, Gregory. I have 2 questions. Let's deal with the first one first. I'm switching over to Nikon from Canon and would like to know what a good all-around shooting lens is for a D800. I am looking at a Nikon 24-70 for event coverage. Thoughts? We are going to have 2 different thoughts on this, Greg.
Yes, I love my 24-70. I couldn't imagine any other lens. It's got a good close focus that I've used sometimes. If I need to get something, rather close to stuff, like some of the flower shots, stuff like that. I'm pretty sure I'm looking at the sunflower photo that I had up earlier. It's actually right over there at a camera shot. I'm pretty sure that I shot that. It's attached. I'm pretty sure that I shot that with my, no, I guess I would have shot that with my 70-200 because it's got a different depth of field. Anyway, I've had really good experience with mine, whereas...
However, I bought mine about 1.5 years ago, and I have had nothing but problems with it. I've sent it back to Nikon twice. I don't know if it's a camera lens issue. I just find that it's grainy, and I struggle with the focus with it. And so I'm not a big fan, but once we figure out what's going on with it, we'll let you know. I adore my 70-200 2.8. I use it for 95% of my photography work probably. If I can use it, I use it. I love the depth of field on it. I just love its functionality. I love its speed. It's my favorite lens. So 2 different people, 2 different answers.
I do think that you might have a lemon or there's something wrong with it.
I think so too.
And it seems to be within spec for at least from what Nikon says.
But it doesn't perform well for me. But we'll let you know. Well, that's an ongoing issue.
If we get an update, we'll definitely say something.
But in general, people love that lens. Second question. Second, I really like your professional look you put out there with your shirt. Weird, I know. However, looking at expanding my photography business and would like some insight on this thought.
First thing you're going to need is some good branding and a solid logo. If you don't have, if you have just you made your own logo or it's just text that's in a special font, you may not like it after a year and you may wish you hadn't done it. Me, on the other hand, I actually had a designer work with me on my logo because I wasn't able to do it myself, and I was having trouble coming up with a good, the right font and the right look and the right everything, and so it worked out well at least for me.
Right, and there's some companies online that will compete. We'll have to see if we can find it, but a friend of mine got her logo by putting her information out there, and then lots of different designers competed to come up with the winning logo. I had a college student design mine. You can also go to Etsy. That sometimes with Etsy, if you have a non-unique one, you can pay a lot less. So there are lots of different ways to get a good logo, and then finding a good company to do the shirts. Good way to go.
Another thought would be is if you use a local designer, local graphic designer in your area, maybe you can say to them, hey, I'm a professional photographer. I'm looking for additional work, and is there anyone you can refer me to? That could be somewhere else you can
and
get
sometimes
business.
Those companies will design your logo for you as well.
So.
Just make sure it's something. For me, I shoot a lot of different things, so I don't want something florally sweet like a wedding. Some wedding photographers I know have a real scripted, really beautiful, but I also do sports, and I don't want a real scripted, beautiful font on a sports image. So consider what you're shooting as you design your logo.
Yep, that make a difference.
And your branding. Next question from Skylar L. And how impressed are you, Skylar, that I know how to pronounce your name? At Gazillo, what would you look for in an external battery pack? What makes one better? Which one has enough juice for me? Is buying used safe?
I am a big fan of the Quantum Turbo batteries. Number one, because they're good quality. Number two, because they are manufactured here in the United States. They're actually in northern Jersey, New Jersey is where they're based. Love their quantum turbo batteries. They have a couple different ones, different capacities, different sizes, different weights. These are the older quantum turbos. I actually have 3 of these and another one that I've used for parts. So I have some experience with these, and you can actually replace the batteries in these. They're very easy to take apart. If you wanted to do it yourself, you could, although you got to make sure that the capacitor isn't charged so you don't get zapped, because that could hurt a little bit.
Or that you don't ixnay the warranty if you do that. Sometimes you can't do it.
Yeah, and it's actually not that expensive to get to send it back and have the battery replaced. So I've done that, and I've had good luck. And circuitry, and they're actually a leather outside case, so it works out pretty good. They also make mounts, which, where is that mount? Grab that mount off of that stand right there, Kathy. They actually make mounts for these. You can mount the stands if you're using it externally. That is not the Quantum one. It's actually another brand. But I bought this off of B&H actually recently because I lost my old one. I lost the stand. I must have left it somewhere and it disappeared. So anyway, this guy actually goes on to here, and so that's how you can mount it to a stand if you needed it to be on an external strobe. So you get a lot more flashes out of it. For how much power you're going to get out of it, it depends. How much power are you using? On average, I get from 200 to 300 flashes out of a single one of these before the battery goes dead. You still do need to put double A's in your 900, 800, whatever. And the other thing is the cables. Buy a spare cable. They do go. It happens. You know, they're always getting twisted and crushed, and they get thrown in the bottom of your bag, and something happens to them. So have an extra one of these lying around. These go for about 75 bucks, I think, for a cable. These guys are probably about 20. I bought it on B&H. And these boxes are batteries probably, I think, a little over 200, like 250 for each one. But they're going to last you a good long time. And you can use these to power 2 strobes if you need it, or 3 strobes. I think they'll let you do up to 3. Definitely you can do 2. Or you can also hook it up to your camera if you needed an external battery. Yeah.
Didn't know that.
You can hook up. They make special cables so that you can hook it up to your camera.
So do we just wear that on your belt or something? How would you carry that
or
out?
you take this if you're shooting for a long time, a video or something like that. You can,
as long as you're not moving around,
hook this to your tripod and hook it up there.
Gotcha.
And so it would be it's a good way to go. But highly recommend the Quantum Turbos. I haven't had experience with other brands getting them used. If you're doing one of the Quantums, as long as you get it for a good price, whereas if basically saying, okay, the battery goes, how much am I really saving? Look at the replacement cost of the actual battery pack inside, and then add it up. If you're saving 50 or 75 bucks, then it might be worth it. Including the replacement cost of one of the batteries.
And with anything used, make sure you're getting it somewhere reputable.
Yeah.
Chris Liu has a question. When shooting a wedding, what settings to use on direct flash? I get harsh light on my subject at times. The way I normally shoot things like that is make sure that my camera settings are all correct, and then shoot TTL and adjust my exposure compensation up or down, because I'm moving around a lot, so I want to make sure that things are adjusting as need be. But knowing your underlying settings is very important. Yep,
you gotta know your aperture, shutter, and ISO on the camera, how they work in relation to one another, and of course the 5 parts of flash. If you're not quite understanding those, that could be an issue. The other thing is that if you're getting harsh light from the strobe, it could be because a couple things. Number one, it could be your exposure metering setting. Stay off of center weighted, stay off of spot. Only use the matrix on the Nikon, or evaluative is what it's called on the Canon. Make sure you're using one of those, because in general, it's at least in my experience, they work better when you're using TTL. And make sure your focus is accurate. If you're missing focus, that is a part of the exposure setting when you're using TTL because of the distance factor there. So if that is off, if you're missing focus, it's going to overexpose. The flash is going to think that it's farther away or too close. so you're going to get either more or less light.
Speaking of bright lighting, Remco has a question for us about high key images and how to do that using studio strobes.
Easy one. Number one, I'm glad to hear you're going to use studio strobes with this, because you need to be using them because you're going to get a nicer pattern. You're going to get more even. When you're using a small strobe like this, it's much tougher to get a nice even pattern because the strobe and everything is so small. You don't have that bare bulb, which is going to bounce light everywhere. So it's much more difficult with a smaller on-camera kind of a strobe.
Although I was joking with Greg, the only time I've ever really done high key is when I was doing some pet work. And so my subjects were only this big. Yeah. So this was just fine because I've got a wide enough body of light.
Definitely. And but if you are doing full length shots, when I do a full length person on a high key setting, I have 2 lights on 2 stands and 2 umbrellas, and then I put that just behind their position. Set that background 2 stops brighter than the foreground, and that's it. It should be very close. Maybe you can get away with a stop and a half if you don't mind in some areas, or just a little bit on the gray side. But 2 stops is usually a good number. You get you a nice super bright white, and you don't have too much. You don't want the person to be too close to the background, because what happens is the light reflects off the background back onto the person, and you get like around the edges, you get a little bit of that light falling off and wrapping around the person right at their edge of their face or their head or their clothing, stuff like that, and it typically doesn't look good. So you want to keep them at least, I'd say, 5-6 feet off of that background, and at 2 stops bouncing off that white background and coming back, it's not enough to really mess it up. And I've done that a lot for product photography, that kind of thing, and that 2 stop is a good number.
Excellent. Julianne Moore, how do you use the flash to fill the background? I was trying to use bare flash or with a small umbrella outside in the open shade with a white dog. And we were talking about high key before, where you are using the flash to light the background. And Julie, I think, I could be wrong, but I think that in this case, maybe you need to change your thinking a little bit, and that you use the ambient light and set your camera such that the background is properly exposed, not the dog, and then use your flash to expose the dog. White dogs can be tricky because you lose detail if you blow out the whites a little bit. I have the opposite problem. I have a black dog, and so trying to get her all lit is tricky as well. But I think you'll have better luck if you're trying to use the flash to light the dog and not the background.
Of course, we're thinking that she's shooting outside in this situation.
Correct.
Which we don't know for sure. If she does have additional questions, you guys can always repost or post a photo with it saying, hey, how can I do this better? And we'll gladly answer that. But hopefully we answered that.
Yes.
Go ahead. I think there's still a couple more, right? We had a lot of questions after last week. So.
Federico, how do you get the intensity of the flash to set it manually? Also, how do you get a stream of light to simulate sort of a ray of light?
So Federico, he actually commented on this afterwards, and he clarified what he was asking. Basically what he was saying is, how do you measure it? Well, and what is the unit of measure it in order to that you would kind of calculate that in? And in my mind, I don't worry about it. That's a very technical kind of sense. In fact, I was just watching a show with Mythbusters where they were measuring the light in lumens, and that's not something that I don't think we really need to worry about. The only thing you need to worry about is your aperture and each f-stop and how much light are you. Basically, it's a relative thing in your f-stops, and don't worry about, at least in my mind, it's not something that I worry about at all. It's how that final image looks. What's the quality of light, number 1? What's the power of light, number 2? And then how does it work with the other light sources in the image? And I'm done. So it's more of an artistic thing rather than a technical, scientific kind of thing. How would you measure it? You need some kind of a meter in order to really be able to measure it, and you'd use a handheld meter in order to do that. The second part of your question, there's actually a really great video from Film Riot, where in the middle of the shot they show fog in the shot. And so in order to catch that beam of light, which if you're using a strobe, would need to be very narrow. You can't really, have a wide. It needs to be a very narrow beam, like a flashlight or something like that. You need to have something for that light to reflect off of. Sometimes it'll be dust in the air, that kind of thing. If you see it in your home, but you need to have that beam. But you need something in the air for that light to reflect off of. And so the easiest way to do it is to add fog into the background or into the shot, and so you'll kind of get that feeling of it. Trial and error, see if it works. Check out this video over on Film Riot. A lot of times the cinematography stuff can apply to photography and vice versa, so it's an interesting video.
That question gave me another question. How do you get the starburst that you see sometimes behind a bride and groom or in some other... How do you do that starburst?
That can be really easy to do. All you got to do is adjust your aperture.
So the higher the aperture, the sharper the burst?
Yep, and also the larger the burst.
Okay.
So if you're down around 32, something like that, you're going to have a larger burst with longer legs, I guess you could say.
Longer bursts?
Longer stars. Whereas
Spikes?
if you're down around 11 or 8, they're going to be smaller and a little more controlled.
So shutter speed doesn't matter?
No.
Shutter speed doesn't matter?
No, not at all. It's an artistic thing, and what does it work? Because I've seen images that people have done that before, and they shot it like f32, and so it was a really, really wide and took up way too much of the shot. If they were a little smaller, a stop less or 2 stops less, it would have been just enough. So that's one of those things that are like seasoned to taste.
Right.
Just a little.
And if you haven't played with that before, that might be a great topic for your submission for the photo contest.
Definitely.
Something to think about.
Definitely. You made me think of something, but then I lost it as we were talking about it. It figures. It figures.
And how about zoom? We haven't talked about zoom on the flash.
Yes.
So how does that affect?
That's a modifier, just like a softbox or an umbrella or something like that. It's a modifier. So you're changing the pattern of light. That means it's a modifier. So that's
as you zoom in, you're getting a more concrete pattern, stronger.
More directional. Okay. Yep, smaller pattern of light, exactly. So yes, that makes a difference in your settings when you're playing or when you're setting stuff. If you're not moving and the camera isn't moving, that's why I say put it on a tripod. Work with everything on the tripod, the stand on the tripod, or light on the tripod, or a separate stand. Put it on manual. Put the camera on manual, and you're going to end up with a better subject. Whereas if your camera's on, the flash is on the camera, you're going to be zooming in and out, and you're wondering why things are changing a little bit.
TTL.
Yeah, the TTL could make a difference.
So can you only zoom on manual? Is that the only setting you can zoom on?
No, it'll do it on automatic. When you zoom the lens, it will automatically zoom. The flash will zoom in and out.
Right, but can you only set it on where you want your zoom to be on manual?
I don't understand the question. There's an automatic zoom and there's a manual zoom. Automatic, if you zoom the lens, it'll automatically zoom in or out. Or manually, you can do it yourself.
On any setting, like even on TTL, you can change?
Yes.
Okay.
On an exposure setting, yes. Yeah, typically those are separate.
Okay.
At least with the Nikon strobes, they are. That's a separate setting that's independent of the metering mode.
So that's why it's really good to know your equipment, because there's some things that I didn't even know, even though I've been using it for a while. And
yeah, you got to play with your equipment, keep trying, do different stuff with it, do a lot of shots,
and sometimes you don't learn it. Greg and I were talking earlier, because I'm doing a couple of new styles with real estate portraits. I keep saying that, real estate portraits, like the house is posing. I haven't had to use settings that now I have to use, so now it's a need-to-know basis. I didn't need to do it for portraits, but now I need some other things, and I have to play with it. So I like to know it before I get on site.
Well, I think we answered a lot of questions and hopefully clarified a few things. If you do have more questions, I guess we should just make the question a week the same thing, because maybe people do have more flash questions.
Think so.
Maybe this brought up other ideas. Get your photos posted over to the forum for the photo assignment sponsored by Epson, and that's due on the 11th. So you got about a week and a half in order to get those posted.
And if you have other questions for us about Flash and have an image to go with it, that's always great too. What did I do wrong? How can I improve that? We would love to be able to help you in that regard.
Yep, and I still can't remember what the other thing was, so let's end the show for today.
Excellent.
Thanks, guys. Keep shooting. See ya.